Hey everyone, welcome back to the Echoes podcast. I'm Jessica Smetana. He's Golic Jr. We're ringing in the new year with finally the roster conversation that we've been promising people for the last 3 weeks about the 2025 Notre Dame football team moving into the new year, 2026. Now we have Riley Leonard news, Harrison Smith. We're going to talk about him off the top. We're going to talk about an incident that occurred at 2 a.m. Eastern time on the West Coast this past weekend later on in the show, Mike. But let's start with the football team, and specifically the starting quarterback of last year's football team, Riley Leonard, who finally got a shot to start a game in the NFL this past weekend. What were your thoughts seeing Riley out there do his signature little hop as he ran into the end zone?
I was going to say, if we're looking at the Notre Dame to NFL pipelines and transition both ways is in vogue to start the show, man, Riley had himself a day. This is going to be interesting, Jess, because Indianapolis announced that they're going to bring back their brass there. As we're recording this, it's Black Monday in the NFL. Everyone's getting hired and fired right now. A bunch of teams have already made those decisions. And it sounds like the Colts are going to keep everyone, despite the fact that they lost 1 million games down the home stretch of the season. Briefly employed Phillip Rivers as the quarterback for 3 of those before letting Riley go. Well, and I think that becomes the source of this. Riley finished 21 of 34, 270 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Had a couple of costly turnovers, including a fumble that got scooped up. Not totally his fault on that one. I think there was one interception later that was. But overall in that game, you saw the best of Riley Leonard. You saw him make the kind of plays on the perimeter that remind people he is not a sneaky athlete. He's just a real athlete that happens to be white. And even some big-time throws from him, like that connection with Alec Pierce that had not been a steady diet of that offense with Phillip Rivers under center because he's 44 years old, I think is going to rightly invite a bunch of questions about what they were thinking for the last month. It was fun. It was entertaining and nostalgic, and I loved it. But now as you see that yesterday from Riley, who all you can ask for when you're a guy in Riley's position is the opportunity to go earn more reps. And when you get a chance like that late in the season, Jess, that's the kind of stuff that can keep him employed for years, having a game like that. So now this team where a regime stays in place or anyone else that might be looking at him says, all right, we can trust that guy to go out there and play NFL caliber football against the best defense in the sport that had their starters in and feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, he had his first NFL touchdown, gave the game ball to his parents in the crowd, Mike. But speaking of nostalgia, we also saw potentially Harrison Smith's final game in the NFL. They called a timeout. The Vikings had a timeout and he walked off the field and everyone clapped and everything. So I don't know if he's officially announced he's retiring, but I think that's probably it. You played with Harrison for a number of years at Notre Dame. He's probably, if there is a better Notre Dame alum in the NFL over the past 20 years that isn't an offensive lineman, because you have to take Zach Martin out. I know you're about to rip my head off. We're taking Zach Martin and Joe Alt and Quentin Nelson out of it, non-offensive linemen. Harrison, I know you just, I could tell you were about to get so mad.
Obvious that was.
You were about to get so mad. Okay, let me finish my sentence. Is there anyone better than Harrison Smith since 2012 in the NFL from Notre Dame?
No. I mean, when you look, Harrison and Zach are going to be the 2 gold jackets from the last 2 decades of NFL football by Notre Dame players. I think that's a pretty good way to do it. So yes, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I am. It's
nice
so
to
true.
See. It was nice to see. He's had an incredible career with the Vikings. He was the best safety in the NFL for a number of years, made 6 Pro Bowls, I believe, from 2015 to 2021. Is that right?
Yeah.
So
he made 6 Pro Bowls, was AP first team All-Pro in 2017, second team All-Pro in 2018, finished 4th in Defensive Player of the Year voting in that 17 season. And you look at the career stats, I remember someone kind of tapped me on the shoulder and mentioned this probably 4 or 5 years ago. They're like, oh yeah, Harrison Smith's going to be a Hall of Famer. And I was like, wait, are Harrison Smith? And then you look up and realize, and it's not just volume stats, anything 39 career interceptions. 4 of those went for touchdowns. 13 forced fumbles, 10 recoveries, 21 and a half sacks, 51 tackles for loss. He did everything. And even now was still playing at such an incredibly high level for a guy that, you're right. I was teammates with Harry at Notre Dame for a bunch of years. And Notre Dame fans will remember, he started off playing out of position. He was basically playing Sam linebacker down in the box in some of those early defenses that got him on the field. And then they bumped him back to safety, and the rest was history. Like, they called him the eraser in the locker room because it was like, it was the running joke in the defensive meeting room. Like, you would go and turn on the tape, and there'd be a wide open hole up front, running back or someone looked like they were going to go for 20, 30 yards. No one's in the frame. And then they would click the clicker again, and in the next second, 22 would fire out of nowhere and just saw him off. Like, it was the stuff of lore. Like, that's why him and Zach are funny to talk about, because they both have things like that from Notre Dame. Like, we used to call Zach the Warden because he'd do one-on-ones, and he would just, quietly put the defensive end in handcuffs and usher them by the quarterback on almost every rep. Like, both of those guys were so dominant every day, but also just like the most deeply like normal, like every man in the locker room, great teammates. Like, Harrison was an awesome hang. I lived across the street from him for a couple of years there. And then obviously one of the guys that is a rarity in the modern NFL, where the entirety of his career from being selected in the first round till now all happened with the same organization in Minnesota. And you just see across, multiple defensive regimes, even flourishing now with Brian Flores in that group, like just a special player, an awesome dude. And you could tell also someone who is now a father and like clearly the old man in the locker room, because and it seemed like he knew this was coming, because every time he got asked about, his football career in retrospect or anything else, he was on the verge of tears, like talking to the media. And that was not like who Harrison was as I knew him as a 20-something-year-old in college, but the sands of time come for all of us and make us the emotional version of our parents. He's
an old 36-year-old man now in NFL years. It's hilarious how being 36, if you're a professional athlete, is like, well, okay, Grandpa, wipe the tears away, buddy. Let's get you back to bed. But yeah, Xavier Watts having a great end to his season with the Falcons. Kyle Hamilton, I think, should be like the de facto NFL MVP, given how bad the Ravens were after he got concussed in the last game of the season, Mike. So there may be a few more Notre Dame safeties joining Harrison Smith in the in Canton down the line here. But anything else we need to get off our chest from the last week of the NFL regular season before we talk about some Notre Dame coaching news and then move into our roster conversation, namely our offensive line conversation that I know you've been itching to talk about?
No, just like you said, happy Riley got his opportunity. Congrats to Harrison, who's again a guy I've known since I was like 18 years old, and gotten to watch all of this from the cheap seats now. But I really enjoyed it. Respect the way he goes about his game. You can tell his teammates love the hell out of him. Like, he's one of the most unique guys I ever played with, and has made an incredible career for himself. And if this is the end, like, dude deserves some rest. I know he's probably going to go and move a bunch of farming equipment around his house and be uprooting trees and doing weird wild man stuff.
Lumberjack stuff, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So no, he's an awesome dude. Super happy for him and his family and the career there in Minnesota. Again, we'll have it, the conversation on other shows about it, but to me, like a pretty lock Hall of Famer whenever it happens, and it should be sooner than later.
Yeah. And like, don't expect him to extend his Hall of Fame date like Phillip Rivers did by coming back to play as a 44-year-old. What a weird NFL season this has been for the Colts. And speaking of the Colts, Mike, not Chris Partridge, not the former Michigan coach, Charlie Partridge, slip of the tongue. Charlie Partridge, the Colts defensive line coach, formerly of Pittsburgh and Arkansas and Wisconsin and a number of other college teams, is now going to be the new Notre Dame defensive line coach, replacing Al Washington, who has moved over to be the linebackers coach after Max Bulla left for Michigan State. Based off of the reaction I've seen from the Pitt Panthers subreddit, this is a great hire for Notre Dame. The Pitt fans are like freaking out. They're like, Pat Narduzzi should have offered this guy a blank check. He should have been our next defensive coordinator, blah, blah, blah. Like, I can't believe that he's going to Notre Dame to be a line coach. This is ridiculous. So based off of that alone, I'm feeling pretty good about it. I've read a few articles about it. He's developed a lot of talent in his days at Pitt and Wisconsin. So that's nice. Also sounds like he had a connection with Chris Ash, which maybe helped seal the deal. They were on the same staff, overlapping at Wisconsin, Arkansas, and Drake back in the 90s when Ash was a GA there, I believe. So what are your initial thoughts on this and the fact that ND was able to lure away an NFL coach to take a college job?
Yeah, well, first off, I do like that as a metric for judging quality, is how mad an opposing fan base is that once knew this person. So we'll add that into the mix. But it seems to check a lot of boxes. And for Notre Dame to keep continuity on its staff, like, Al Washington staying here when there was interest reportedly for him from his alma mater in Boston College, and we know what a siren song that can be for guys at times to keep him around. I know he's got some experience in his background working with linebackers. They retained an assistant that's important to that group, a guy that was a former Notre Dame walk-on, and so there's a bunch of good connective tissue. And I think that's kind of what you want going into this season. You and I talked about this a little bit, I think, in the last pod, where if so much of Marcus Freeman coming back, having a returning starter in CJ Carr, your best defensive player in Leonard Moore, like everyone understands the opportunity that's coming in 2026. And so I think preserving as much of the continuity as you have right now, people that know how to work together when the shit hits the fan. Because remember, early in last season, we talked about we, and me specifically, I did not account for how a change in coordinator was going to affect the way that this group operated on game days early in the season where they were playing incredibly important games. Now you've got a year of that for everybody. And the one new part that you are bringing into this in Partridge is someone who has extensive experience in communicating in that way with the guy who is Notre Dame's defensive coordinator. Also comes with a bunch of recruiting pedigree during an offseason where defensive line is going to be a massive target for Notre Dame. And so it seems to really sit right. Partridge seems like a guy that has done a lot of his best work at the college level. And, some people read into it with the Colts as maybe him wondering about the future of that staff there. It just might be a guy that also recognized I fit better at this level of football, and the development, the things that he was able to do there are something that does appeal to him. We have this conversation about what guys like in college or pro. And so it seems to be an awesome hire for Notre Dame at a time where at that position in particular, it feels pivotal. You've got Boubacar coming back. You need Bryce Young to make a big jump. Like, you need guys that need some development that are already a part of your roster that are going to be the expensive tent poles that you try and retain.
Yeah, this is one of those things too where I would love to know the salary difference between NFL line coach and
Sure.
top tier college football line coach, because it does seem like the salary pool at ND is pretty big right now for the assistants and such. But this is, to me, the biggest sign that this is quintessential Freeman hire is that Charlie Partridge was formerly a head coach at FAU, had a pretty tough record there. It was after Carl Pelini was let go because of some scandal. So not the best time at FAU, but that, to your point about leadership and things of that nature, you kind of see the type of coaches that Marcus likes to hire and have around. And those are the types of people that can have experience in those high leadership positions, and then also have the hands-on experience with development. So seems like a solid choice. Well, hopefully we won't have to talk about it again, because it's always good when you don't know the position coaches' names, Mike. That's you know their names when they're getting promoted to somewhere else or hired somewhere else, but you don't really want to know what they're into in the day to day. That's for the sickos only. So excited to see how that goes. Notre Dame's we'll talk about it more later in the show, but they're probably going to be hosting a bunch of D linemen and portal players later this week. So hopefully things are off swinging there. Let's finally talk about Aamil Wagner. Declaring for the NFL, something that we have teased for weeks now. Billy Schrauth and Aamil Wagner both are leaving Notre Dame. They're going to the NFL this year. I think with Schrauth, maybe a little less surprised that he was leaving, given some of the injury history there and his draft stock. Maybe a little bit more surprised Wagner is heading off to the league. So as the O-line guru, what do you make of both captains leaving Notre Dame, trying their luck in professional football this upcoming season?
Yeah, first off, hats off to both guys. Great careers, two captains. Aamil Wagner was also on the All-State Good Works team. Guys that understood what leadership meant and how special that opportunity is at a place like Notre Dame. Went out there and battled their asses off. We're two important guys, on a team that made it to the title last year. So have a ton of respect for the way they handled their business around there and appreciate how they represented the university. As far as the losses and what it means, for Aamil, again, the C on their chest matters. Leadership in that room is particularly important. We always thought about that room as, hey, we're supposed to go out here and lead the team from the front. We got to be the ones everyone can count on. And so when you have two captains in the room, that says a lot about how the rest of the team views that, and filling that void is no small task. That being said, I saw Eric Hansen report. Sounds like in some of the practices they were able to have after the week post-selection Sunday, Gerby Lambert seems in line to move to right tackle, which I think is an awesome move given his size and skill set and how he performed this year. And so I think there's enough talent in that room to where I don't worry too much about this. Schrauth, of the two, was, I think, the better player. Especially at times when you go to the Zenith in the USC game, played some of his best ball there. He just had a level of physicality and pop to his game. He was one of the guys in that line that would really fire off and stun people and set a physical tone. And so losing that is tough, but I think you combine all of that. Like, you look at that in totality. Remember last year, we spent a lot of time worrying about the guys that were leaving in the portal on the offensive line, but I think you also have to look at the guys that are coming back, and like, you've got a depth of talent at that position that's going to make this a really interesting conversation every year. You want to have veteran leaders in that room, but it might not always be conducive to that if you've got young, talented guys that are already seeing the field who have multiple years of eligibility that you can try and lock in. So the way that Gerby played, the way that Sullivan Absher played when pressed into duty last year, Anthony Knapp still at left tackle, and then Will Black, one of the young up-and-comers that everyone's been excited about there. Ashton Craig, Joe Otting, and the way he filled in. Like, you're going to have guys pushing for those jobs. And, God forbid Charles Jagasaw is, able to come back and be truly healthy, and you get the guy that I think on that day is still your best lineman. Like, I just rattled off 5-6 names that you're going to have a hard time whittling down into a starting five. And so it's tough losing experience that Notre Dame worked hard for going back to the beginning of last year with Texas A&M. But I do think at this position, they're well equipped to overcome it.
I'm curious what your thought is on Wagner's draft stock, because that's something that we really haven't talked a lot about this season. With Schrauth, like, he's on a lot of the big board lists and things like that. With Wagner, like, he could have come back. So what do you expect? Do you think he's going to get drafted? Do you think he's a undrafted free agent? What do you expect from that?
Probably later rounds to a guy that could be undrafted. Like, I think he's got a really good chance of getting on someone's roster, a ton of high level experience, like played against a bunch of high level competition. And, we'll have good tape from a bunch of that. I think his 24 tape was a little better than his 25 tape, not having gone back and done the full retrospective on that to get ready for draft season. But, that combined with like the size, the pedigree of coming from a place like Notre Dame that's, in the modern NFL, got a really good reputation for sending guys in technically more advanced than some other places. I think he's got a really good shot to go out there and still make a team.
So I don't know about you, Mike, but like this whole end of December to early January roster re-signing period now, like, this happened very quickly, right? Where like a few years ago, like the portal and like the lack of a portal transfer penalty thing and NIL all kind of happened quickly. But then now within just a span of like a few years, we've gotten to the place where teams are announcing when players are returning to their teams or like re-signing with their teams. I'm curious what your thoughts are on just this like weird, how we got here so quickly and how strange it is to see teams like USC posting that like their, starting running back is re-signing with USC versus, some schools that their approach is just like, well, you'll see if they're on our roster once spring ball starts. Like, you'll know if they're transferring somewhere by the end of the portal period. But like, what do you make of all of this and how strange it is hearing reports that like Notre Dame's renegotiating its contract with CJ Carr and with Leonard Moore. And like, this player might want to transfer to this place because he's not going to get the money that he got last year at Notre Dame or at the school he's at now. And like, how are we supposed to follow all of that and understand all of that as fans in a sport where there isn't a known cap number on NIL deals or anything like that, where like, at least in like NFL or NBA or whatever, any other professional sport, you're like, okay, well, we know what the salary number is going to be. Like in college football, it's like, we don't really know. Like, we know there's like a revenue cap, but no one's going to be under that. Like, these are all going to be like NIL deals that schools will put together. So I don't know. This is an open-ended question, but is this weird for you too, to just see how quickly we've gotten to this place in college football?
It is weird. I think a lot of this is the attempt of these schools and teams to try and get their arms around this in a way that they can replicate. Like, try and make it feel normal, try and develop a process that helps it. But the fact that we already got, like, I forget which of the Texas A&M wide receivers it was.
I think it was Mario Craver.
Mario Cravers, where they re-signed, and the graphic was Mario Cravers has re-signed and become the highest paid wide receiver in the history of Texas A&M football. And I'm like, listen, don't get me wrong. Like I'm totally okay with him getting a bunch of money, but the framework that we use in the NFL for those things where you've got a rich history of guys being paid that makes that something that lands with weight versus we've been doing this for 2 years and really like a year and a half in a way that feels codified makes that feel really funny to me. So yeah, I think we're allowed to say, hey, this feels weird and funny because there's still so much that we don't know, even as they try and add some structure and color to this. So it's interesting. With that in mind, why don't we put a pause on this and add some structure and color to the conversation around Notre Dame and their approach in the portal and how this looks in recent years and where we sit now as Notre Dame heads into a pivotal couple-week stretch here with the portal open.
College football not feeling as juicy as it once did? Let me put you onto something that'll shake up your Saturday and every other day of the week.
Because now that Wendy's has crispy chicken tendies and a powerhouse lineup of new sauces, it's time you transfer to the hottest team in the league.
That's right, Team Tendies. Wendy's Tendies. They're making their undeniable rookie season one for the books. Enjoy first-string flavor from some 5-star recruits. Rep your new favorite team everywhere you go, but make sure to cheer with your mouth closed.
Take it to the end zone of savory sauces like honey barbecue, creamy ranch, and the new Wendy's signature sauce to experience a total taste bud blitz of flavor. It's time to join a team that won't upset you with an upset.
Taste the phenom that's gracing the gridiron with its juicy, crispy, and tendery tendencies. Don't fumble the bag. Commit to Team Tendies and call the most delicious plays in the playbook.
All right, huddle up, guys. Tendies on 3. Tendies on 3. 1, 2, 3, Tendies. Let's do this. Wendy's Chicken Tendies, now at participating U.S. Wendy's. Welcome back to the Echoes. Mike Golic Jr., Jessica Smetana at the Echoes ND Podcast is where you find us on all social media. And, of course, check out the YouTube channel as always. Plenty of great stuff continuing to come your way all offseason because we don't stop even if the football season did. And we will get to what's going on in Notre Dame basketball season right now. Spoiler alert. It's not great, Bob.
No.
It's not great. But
maybe we'll run out of time again.
God willing, as we, in all seriousness, try and get it together on those fronts heading into the winter months here. But Jess, heading into the winter, I think Notre Dame fits into this conversation about college football at large in a way that's really interesting. Because I remember last year when we were sitting around going through the portal season in the midst of the playoff run, Notre Dame made a lot of headlines as the only team in the college football playoff to not be losing players to the portal during that process. There was the famous case of Bo Prabula, the Penn State backup, who had to make the decision to leave the roster for the Missouri starting job in the midst of that run because of when the portal amped up. And everyone made the point of, like, the NFL would never have free agency in the draft in the middle of the playoffs. Well, college football got that now. Now, it's not perfect. We still have the playoffs going on,
which
albeit
is
with a
crazy.
Yeah, wild to think about.
The national championship games in like 2 weeks, Mike. Like, how is this? The calendar makes sense, but go on.
No, and that's a great reminder that this is not perfect because college football is trying to put Band-Aids on bullet holes left and right. But we are now hitting this gap, like at the beginning of the week where the playoff games will be played at the end of the week, and there's this lapse in discussion for a lot of people nationally. You've now got your hook into the daily talk shows where you've got your free agency period that opened up on Friday on January 2nd and is going to go through for the next couple of weeks and has produced already a bunch of big quarterback signings and high-profile player movement across the country. So college football has manufactured some of what I think people were looking for in that, even if it's not perfect. And what it's created is interesting for Notre Dame, I think. And I'd be curious for your impression of Notre Dame and how they've approached portal recruiting strategy overall. Because in recent years, there hasn't been a lot of like big time buzz. It's been Notre Dame kind of lays in the cut, does their thing, and then we'll announce the players that'll go there and you'll have this portal class. Like I remember last year, everyone was freaking out because all they saw was Notre Dame player entering the portal, Notre Dame player entering the portal, offensive lineman, all these different things. And then Notre Dame announced the guys they were signing and it instantly felt better. It's a little more out on Front Street right now where we see reports about who's visiting campus, who Notre Dame's targets are. So how has that kind of affected the way that you digest this time of year for the Irish?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think like if you look at the players that have entered the portal for Notre Dame this season, so far it's been a lot of younger players that if you look at the position they play and the players in front of them and even like the incoming freshmen that are joining the team, it kind of makes sense. I think, Kenny Minchie transferring, for example, makes a ton of sense. Going to play at Nebraska, it looks like next year. So, good for him. He is someone with multiple years of eligibility left, is probably going to make a ton of money to be a starter at a Big Ten team. And that makes sense instead of waiting to, play possibly next year if CJ Carr leaves after 2026. If you look at like some of the younger corners and safeties that are in the portal, same thing. It's like Notre Dame's got its starters. They were potentially looking at adding a corner, which they have at like the nickel position the last few years. But there's also, really high caliber recruits coming in. So yeah, like you kind of have the opportunity to make more money if you leave, and it makes sense. Someone like Josh Burnham, I think, is an interesting one because if he's probably the best. I mean, can you take Kenny Minchie aside because we never really got to see him play too much at Notre Dame, but Burnham's probably the best player that has entered the portal for Notre Dame, going to be playing at Indiana next year. He's someone that it's got limited eligibility left, can make a ton of money being someone that plays more at Indiana than he probably would have played as a depth piece at Notre Dame. And Notre Dame's got to make a decision with, how they manage their roster and paying players that they want to come back next year. And if he can make more money transferring somewhere else and getting more playing time and ultimately help him get to the league, it makes a ton of sense. So I think from like the player output perspective, again, if Josh Burnham's the best player that's leaving from this team, like I think Notre Dame's done a pretty good job of retaining the talent that they need. Like there's a number of players that if they did enter the portal, I would be like, whoa, what the heck, like that, fully in like panic and freak out mode. So I think from that standpoint, like I think the philosophy remains that like they want to recruit high level talent, develop high level talent, and supplement in the acquisition, supplement with acquisitions that help in specific need areas. And so I haven't seen any deviation from that yet. What I have seen is now all of these players that are in the portal have agents, and they want their player that is in the portal to make as much money as possible. And by doing that, they're going to leverage information about where that player's visiting, what that player might be getting, or what, how much interest there is, how good they are, et cetera, et cetera. So like you are going to see situations where Notre Dame loses on a, portal player like Nick Marsh, who it was reported that Notre Dame was really interested in him. LSU is also interested in him. This past weekend, Indiana lands him. Huge get for, Curt Cignetti, who's already shown he's a great head coach playing in the college football semifinal this year. Makes a lot of sense. So yeah, like Notre Dame loses on a player there, but it's also like there's other wide receivers in the portal. Like I'm not necessarily panicking about that. You obviously want to land him. Seems like he was a priority for Notre Dame to land. But like Jontez Williams, the corner that Notre Dame was also interested in, commits to USC this past weekend. If you told me Notre Dame wasn't looking at any secondary players this upcoming year, like I probably would be like, yeah, that makes sense. Like the secondary is pretty good. Like the players that they ended up getting last year, like the Jalen Stromans, I wasn't like, this is like a player that Notre Dame needs to get. I ended up being a really solid player for Notre Dame this year, but was not like the number one guy in the portal ranking. So I've seen a lot of like panic and freaking out about Notre Dame not getting these specific players. And like, I think, it's warranted a little bit to at least be like, well, why? Is it because Notre Dame doesn't want to spend that much money? Is it because these other teams want to spend way more money than Notre Dame's willing to spend? Is it because they don't like Notre Dame? Is it because, Marcus Freeman was mean or something like that? Like, I don't know. I assume it's probably money related, but there's no part of like the philosophy behind what Notre Dame's doing that I think I disagree with. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's more than fair. And I think college fans who maybe don't spend as much time in NFL land are going to kind of have to start to take some things from that because how familiar does that sound, right? Like, Jess, think about all the teams out there. Like, there's a vast range of ways that you can go about team building philosophically. And there are some fan bases, like in the NFL, free agency is awesome. It's fun. It's fast and loose, big names, big contracts. But you also look at the teams that are usually spending big in free agency. Mm-hmm. They're usually bad teams that have to over-index on that have to use that as their strategy. There's outliers like that, the Cowboys, who sit on their hands completely. But like everyone can choose to do that in a different strategy. And so for Notre Dame, their strategy has been, hey, we want to build through high school recruiting still as our bedrock, the same as a lot of the other big-time programs that we see, by the way, and go from there. What you talked about there, the ambiguity around the process, invites fans to prey on their worst thoughts and feelings. Like, yes. It creates the ultimate comparison is the thief of joy because you can make their strength whatever you need to in your head to feel bad about the miss there. Are they willing to spend more money? Is there something more appealing about their coach? Do they think there's a bet? Like, we don't know. And so all you have are those suppositions in there. So again, I go back to what you said is the way Notre Dame has operated in the portal has yielded some pretty positive results for them over the last couple of years. Now, that's changing a little bit. Like, Indiana's a really interesting point of contention because they're in the same state. Obviously, they've had a meteoric rise in the last couple of years. There are Notre Dame players going there now. Pat Coogan was the Rose Bowl MVP for the offensive lineman this past week. So I feel like this one's kind of fresh for a lot of people. But Indiana also is like clearly working with this as their strategy right now. Same way Notre Dame did early in the portal, taking transfer quarterbacks every year, making it work there. Indiana also signed, according to 24/7, the 33rd ranked high school class this last year, while Notre Dame signed the 4th ranked high school class. They're allocating resources as programs in different ways right now. Notre Dame played the national title last year. Indiana looks like they're going to play in the national title this year. There's a lot of different ways to go here and do this right now. And so freaking out because one person's strategy yields a positive result in a season where everyone looked at Notre Dame as a team that was capable of going and making a deep run in terms of what they saw on the field before all the Selection Sunday madness kicked in there. Like, I kind of, it's the same message as last year for Notre Dame fans, which is, hey, calm down. At this point, Marcus Freeman and this regime have earned the benefit of the doubt in how they've moved in this period.
Exactly. You're going to lose recruiting battles in high school recruiting, just like you're going to lose recruiting battles in recruiting players out of the portal. And maybe like you need to reassess and re-strategize if your approach isn't working and if they do strike out a number of times in this period. But if you lose a battle, win the next one. And like maybe Notre Dame still ends up with a receiver that they really want. So that's why I'm not going to panic right now, Mike. There seems like they're hosting a number of players later this cycle. And like you said, if the roster was in shambles and Notre Dame had like tons of need positions and not just like, places where they could add some depth. I think I'd feel a lot differently about all this. But to your point, like the roster's in pretty good shape. Like there's a few things that they could definitely improve on. There's also a number of players coming into next season, especially at the wide receiver position that we just like don't really know about yet. That could be like Micah Gilbert could be awesome. And then it feels silly to spend $2 million on a transfer wide receiver. At the flip side of that is like, if you want to go all in or whatever next season, which to me it feels like Notre Dame has been trying to go all in every season that Marcus Freeman has been the head coach. Like, I don't think I think the plan has been like, let's put together the best roster we can put together like every single season. So I don't really think that there's any change there. What do you think?
I agree with you on that, but I also think there's an acknowledgement that like
the team's better now. Yeah.
Well, the team's better, but also like it's the quarterback. Like it's what we do in football at every level of it. When you feel like it's the reason the Patriots sawed off their arm and mortgaged their future to get Mike Vrabel there, because when you stumble onto Drake May, you make it happen. And for Notre Dame to have the best quarterback that you've had on campus since Brady Quinn coming back for another year, like it does feel like there's a little added weight. So to your point, the swing big mentality could be justified with that, maybe more so than most years, because you understand the opportunity that you've got with him there. But you brought it up, and I do think this is like useful context. Like every meeting I was in, coach I talked to around college football this year, both covering games, working on the other show I do like that, the number one thing they all said is the name of the game in college football right now is retention. What is Notre Dame doing better than almost everyone else right now? Mm-hmm. It's retaining the core pieces of its roster, like you just mentioned. So I do think in all of this, like that's what everyone's saying the hardest thing is to do is keep your guys from getting a wandering eye, keep someone else from coming in and tampering with your players. And if Notre Dame's able to find, recruit, and develop guys that are going out there and performing at a high level and keep them on campus and make sure that's the priority, the way that they've demonstrated, again, putting the emphasis on high school recruiting, stuff like that, you're in a pretty good position relative to the vast majority of the sport.
Yeah, totally agree. So we're not going to do like too in depth on some of the names that we've been, that have been reported as players visiting Notre Dame, because by the time this comes out, there may be like news and then it'll be, old or whatever. Notre Dame did get a commitment from a pretty sick named Australian punter, Jasper Schrauth, Mike, which is I don't know, that's a cool place to start your offseason. A guy named Jasper Schrauth from Australia. Okay, we'll take it. But yeah, we'll probably have a little bit more next week based off of like what's to come. It looks like they're trying to load up on some beef. I know you said you wanted a massive ass. What was your expression?
I want a bunch of ass
There's
up
like
front there.
There's like a 6'6", 355-pound transfer.
Horace Lockett.
Yeah,
yes,
that Notre Dame's hosting later this week. So hopefully next week we'll get to talk about that. But yeah, to your point, I think like there's not anything specifically that I'm gonna freak out about yet. It's still early. We'll see what happens. But I do want to go back to your mention of Pat Coogan, who I think this is another great example of what the modern football landscape is now. And I have also seen like a lot of Notre Dame fans upset, or I guess maybe not upset, but like jealous or nostalgic or frustrated about.
You're going to miss this.
Yeah, exactly. Which I understand because Pat Coogan was awesome. He was great. And he was like a fan favorite on Notre Dame's team that, had a title run and everyone loved Pat Coogan. But
4 quarters of fuck you football.
Exactly. He was insanely quotable and like did an incredible job filling in after Ashton Craig got hurt last year. But Mike, in hindsight, knowing now he is the Rose Bowl MVP on an Indiana team that is the number 1 seed in the playoff, playing in the semifinal, do you think Notre Dame feels like they should have done anything differently with Pat Coogan, or do you feel like this is kind of just a win-win situation for him, Indiana, Notre Dame, and Ashton Craig?
Yeah, I tend to side with the latter on that. Like,
okay.
It's an awesome story. Like, for Cougs, who, like you said, was a great voice in that locker room, became one of the big-time leaders on that team, was an awesome player who, again, didn't go into last year as the starter, stepped up and helped them get to the point where they were playing in a national championship, and now could play in it for a second year and honestly looks like could win it this year with Indiana. Like, what an awesome story. One that we'll probably see more of in college football, like where we had guys play on Super Bowl teams in back-to-back years with different teams. Like, it's just the way she goes right now. But no, it's just a good story. Like, when Ashton Craig was healthy this year, there were times, multiple games where I came away, I was like, that's the best offensive lineman on Notre Dame's team. So you got a guy like that with multiple years of eligibility. Like, again, in an ideal world, you would want to keep your older veteran guys around there, let the younger guys sit behind them, and trust and believe that they all want to stay and be a part of this. They understand that Notre Dame's a great place that develops this position. But like we talked about, that's just not the reality at this point. And so decisions have to get made. And Cougs had a great opportunity, and he went out there and made the most of it. Deserves a ton of credit for that. But if you're Notre Dame, I don't think you need to spend too much time in the rearview mirror, because the player that you've still got, the players around him, are still very good. You still, in terms of the leadership factor, did have 2 captains on the offensive line this year that you were confident putting that C on their chest to go along with guys that were productive in there. So, no, I don't think that's one people need to do anything but celebrate. Like, it's awesome.
Yeah.
It's really cool that Pat Coogan and that offensive line got that recognition and that he's getting this shine post last year where he was an important part of that team. Like, don't let jealousy cloud everything about, like,
to be fair, I don't think it's like jealousy. Well, I think it's like jealousy of Indiana being in the playoff when Notre Dame got snubbed. I don't think it's like, I think it's more like, did the coaching staff make a mistake? And to your point, like, if he were like a wide receiver or a tight end or like a position where like he was going to get playing time, he just wouldn't be the starter, I think it's a different conversation. But like, he obviously, was going to get a starting job and some money if he transferred, but instead of playing behind Ashton Craig this year, which is likely what would have happened. So I think that's why it's sort of like a win-win situation. I've also seen like, well, he was such a good leader. Notre Dame needed that leadership earlier in the season. I don't think Notre Dame like lost the first 2 games because of leadership. I think they lost because they forgot how to play defense a couple times in a row. And then once they figured that out, like, they were set. So
we lost because we played too much zone defense and thought we were a rush 4 team, and on offense ran a completely different scheme that we ran the entire rest of the year in the game against Miami at the beginning of the season. Like, we don't need to overcomplicate this.
I agree. If anything, just go be mad at Chris Ash again, which is fine. I'll accept that as a place to put your frustration.
The thing with Pat, but to your point, like, the thing with Pat, like, do I think the coaching staff made a mistake? Like, boiling it down to just results, no. If I'm Pat Coogan, do I absolutely want to say bleep you to the staff that like didn't want to bring me back at that price or whatever? Maybe there is some of that built in. Maybe it was amicable. Again, to your point, we have no idea the nature of how crazy. This went down.
Because, is it like let's say like Indiana offered him a ton of money, which I assume they did. Let's say Indiana, they're like, hey, we're going to give you a bunch of money if you transfer here. Is Notre Dame going to say, okay, well, we'll pay you what we're paying our starting center and now we'll pay for 2 starting centers, but you're not going to play, but we can't bear to see you leave. Like, these are the kind of business decisions that, like, at least at the NFL level, there you see like the dollars and cents, Mike, and like you kind of understand like a little bit like the level that you're operating at. And in college right now, we don't. And I'm not saying like there needs to be more transparency or anything like that. I'm just saying, like, as a fan, you have to the reporters that talk about these decisions aren't going to say that. Like, they're not, for whatever reason, going to report on, like, here's the amount of money Notre Dame was offering and here's the amount of money that Indiana was offering. And then you can see the comparison and understand why the decisions are made. That's not how any of this is being reported or covered, nor should it be, because I think people could just make things up and it wouldn't even really be possible to fact check it in a lot of situations. So that's kind of, you just, maybe read between the lines a little bit, but understand like there is a little bit more going on than like just the headlines.
This is one of those spots where I would encourage people, and this is maybe where like in a lot of ways I have a fan brain. You and I bond over this because we have a very similar fan brain, but this is one of the areas where I'm always going to just kind of hold on to the player brain. And Marcus Freeman said it best, like, these guys aren't 1 or 2 year rentals even when they leave Notre Dame. The way that Marcus Freeman talked about some of the guys that, departed and came back this year at different schools and the chance to see them, like, that's kind of how I look at these guys. And when I was a player, that was how I always thought about it. Like, transferring was different when I was in school, but it was the same idea. If you don't want to be here for X, Y, or Z reason, and there's a better opportunity for you out there somewhere, and you were a good teammate, you were a guy that I could count on, and I bled with you, and we did all that work every day, I want what's best for you. Like, certainly I want to win for our team, but I always would rather see our guys succeed, whether it's with us or somewhere else. And so if you've got a better opportunity to play consistently, in this case also make money and do that stuff, and it ends up working out well, like, I'm going to be happy for you. And maybe that's a defect in my wiring as a fan, but unfortunately, that's the part I can't let go of.
It works both ways. Like, Notre Dame's also plucking out, players that they like from other teams and saying like, hey, we can make it worth your while if you want to play for us. So like and we're both very much pro, like, yeah, you have limited time in college football, so you have to maximize your opportunities. So that all of this is to say, it's been a very interesting couple of weeks. For the Notre Dame roster. We'll have way more next week, I'm sure, but
I will be stunned, Jess, if we're not here this time next week talking about Notre Dame landing a bunch of big defensive line recruits that they were looking for, getting a boundary X wide receiver, and everyone feeling a little bit more calm about the entire situation, the same way we saw happen last year.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, shall we take a break and move on to I don't know. What do you want to talk about in the next segment? Let's talk about the USC TCU bowl game. Maybe we'll do that.
And maybe Micah Shrewsberry trying to eat a referee.
Welcome back to the Echoes podcast. We are, in fact, now going to talk about the Notre Dame Cal men's basketball game this past weekend.
Woo!
Tipped off at 11 o'clock Eastern, Mike. I know you're a West Coast person, but did you stay up for the end of this one?
No, absolutely not. I am many things, but I am still an absolutely sleepy guy. So I caught the replays of it the next morning and watched all of the anarchy that ensued.
Yeah, not good. So Micah Shrewsberry apologized for his outburst after the game at one of the officials. It was a bad look. He apologized, apology accepted. Like, nothing else you need to say other than like, that was really a tough look.
Well, no, I was just going to say, for anyone that may have missed what happened in that moment, if they didn't watch the game or didn't see it, the end of regulation, Notre Dame is up 3, goes to intentionally foul Cal, ends up getting it called in the act of shooting for a 4-point play. And immediately after, Micah Shrewsberry goes over and tries to murder the official.
Yeah. Okay. So it was a bad call. Like, we need to agree on that fact, right? Like, I've seen some contrarians be like, no, this is like, during whatever. This was during the shooting motion or right before the shooting motion. That should have been a shooting foul. Mike Bray said it was a bad call, and I trust Mike Bray. So didn't like it. Hate that that's how the game ended. Obviously, like, the team could have played better. They made a bunch of mistakes. I didn't go back and like rewatch the whole second half of the game. It was on at 2:00 Eastern time, but I've watched a lot of Notre Dame's men's hoops this year, and yeah, they make mistakes sometimes. Like, they didn't play their best game at the end of that one. So did it need to end that way? No, but it did, and it was a bad call. And it's one of those things that, like, this basketball team's already a tournament bubble team. This could be the kind of result that keeps them out of the tournament. You understand why the frustrations are as high as they are when, coaches lose their jobs over things like not making the NCAA tournament 3 years in a row. They're already down Marcus Burton, and this is an important ACC game. They won their first game of the West Coast swing against Stanford and looked like they were going to win against Cal, and then this happens. So it's a huge shame, but you can't lose your cool like that. And so it was just bad to see Micah Shrewsberry go after the referee like that. Tough to see like Notre Dame players holding him back. The ACC formally reprimanded him, did not suspend him, which were you surprised that he didn't get a game suspension from the conference, Mike? But I was maybe a little surprised, but also like maybe like they're like, it was kind of a bad call. Maybe he had a point. I don't know.
It was a bad call that happened late. And I don't know, he didn't actually swing on the guy. I get you had players holding him back, but to me, that always does somewhat feel performative, as do most basketball related outbursts. So it looked bad with him running across the court there, but he didn't pull a knife on the guy. I don't know. It was certainly not the ending that you wanted, but even with the bad look stuff, I don't know, we see coaches raise hell about calls all the time to try and make a show of it so it doesn't happen again, or they send a strong message in that moment. So I maybe underreact to stuff like that, given that I didn't ever think we were really in danger of him going over there and getting on top of that official and throwing haymakers.
But is it possible that that's because Notre Dame's bench, I forget which player it was that held Shrews back, is possibly football guard material? It was a pretty good block.
Honestly, great rep. You're absolutely right, Jess. We shouldn't lose sight of that. Kind of like when we used to go back and do Black Friday security videos of security guards stopping people from stealing a TV from Best Buy. That was incredible footwork, great hand placement, all of the above. We need to find that young man's name and see if he wants to try and pull double duty next year.
Anyways, so rough night for the basketball program. Whether or not you think it was the worst thing you've seen in the world, he didn't get suspended. He apologized. Apology accepted. Don't do that again, though. That was the kind of thing that if you keep having bad results, it's you had bad results and you kind of did that embarrassing thing that one time, which doesn't really do you any favors down the line. The women's basketball team also lost 2 tough conference games. I'm kind of in panic mode with both basketball programs right now. I feel pretty okay about the men's team if they beat Cal over the weekend, but losing and having the coach outburst makes me a little I'm not getting the warm and fuzzies. It's not feeling good, Mike. And then the women's team, the last 2 games, the overtime loss to Georgia Tech is brutal, and then losing to this Duke team that is just so hard to watch. Not feeling good about it. Kind of knew this was going to be more of a down year given the talent on the team, but didn't think it would be this down. So they've got an opportunity to rebound from that later this week. Hopefully no pun intended, hopefully they are able to do that. But it's been a bad weekend for the basketball programs.
It's tough, and right, wrong, or indifferent, I think because of the history of both, I react much more strongly to the women's program being down than I do the men's program that was a lot more defined by hey, if you make the tournament every few years, that's kind of deemed successful and you can stick around for a really long time. We know the couple of Elite 8 runs were a ton of fun, but in general, Notre Dame has not been a school defined by its men's basketball program
for sure
the same way it has by the women's program. And you've got this again, Tungsten Armo Doyle thing that's going on with Notre Dame women's hoops this year now, where every other night, Hannah Hidalgo breaks some record, broke Niele Ivy's record, I think for career steals at Notre Dame over this past week or so. And then go out, we have these losses on the court. So that one's a little tougher to reconcile because my entire life, basically, the women's basketball program, even when the football team wasn't, has been one that we can count on campus. And so if that's fractured, let me tell you what, Notre Dame lacrosse, and we got the news we didn't get to during the show today. Jordan Faison made the announcement that he is not going to play lacrosse this spring. The former Notre Dame lacrosse midfielder, who was one of the best players on a team that won back-to-back national championships before last year, not going to play. His brother Dylan, who's a 5-star recruit, one of the top players in the class of 2026, reclassified and is going to be there this spring to play with the Notre Dame lacrosse team. And Jess, that was the one thing I kind of thought, would it keep him playing lacrosse? Because I always looked at this year as, all right, clearly after this season, he was a guy that displayed enough potential to be seriously considered as someone with an NFL future. And would he want to risk that on the injury potential of the spring, the loss in time of skill development that he's got to split with spring football, or would he go all in on that? So I wasn't surprised by the timing, but for the opportunity to potentially be Notre Dame's next Kavanaugh's and play with your brother there in the spring. So tough loss for the lacrosse team, who now has all of my hopes and dreams firmly in the palm of their hands based on the course of action the rest of this year.
We are now a football and lacrosse podcast. The basketball seasons are canceled. In all honesty, we'll be here win or lose for the foreseeable future. And hopefully next week we'll have some new players on the football team that we can celebrate. Before we go, Mike, do you have any Notre Dame related New Year's resolutions that you want to share with the audience at home? I have one.
Do you have one? Go ahead and share it. I've got one that I can give you, but it's comparatively less well thought out.
Okay, this goes back like 2 years ago when Notre Dame had a bunch of wide receivers enter the transfer portal, and people were freaking out, like the sky was falling. It was the end of the world and everything was going wrong. So my New Year's resolution the last 2 years, well, last, I guess 3-ish years, is I'm not going to overreact about things that are going to happen in September, in January. I will react to those things if and when they happen in September, October, November, but I'm not going to react to them now. That includes players leaving in the portal. That includes strength of schedule conversations, of which, like, I understand if you're a big picture college administrator and you're looking at Notre Dame's strength of schedule and like what teams you want to schedule in the future, why that's something that you might care about. As a person that watches and covers college football, I don't know yet how good those teams on the schedule are going to be. We'll know more next year. We don't even know who like half the quarterbacks are going to be on the teams Notre Dame's playing against. So again, my resolution, I'm not going to freak out about things that can and might and may not even happen next year in the football season, currently on January 6th.
Don't let the bad thing happen twice. That's
exactly.
Good life advice for everybody.
Exactly.
When it comes to worrying
good
about
therapy talk.
That is good therapy talk. We're both putting that to action, which is lovely. No, it's a great reminder. I mean, Christ, Indiana was Indiana 2 years ago, and now they're about to be Indiana capital I.
Indiana last year when Notre Dame beat them in the playoff, and people were like, well, they just got outclassed. They should have never been in here.
Right.
They're stupid and they suck and they're bad. Now it's like, well, actually, they're pretty good because a lot can change in a year. So
yeah. So don't worry about that. Good advice for all, including myself. Mine was a lot more simple. I want to stop scaring my pug during games.
I did that. I did that to my dog during the Steelers-Ravens game when the Ravens. I'm a Steelers fan. If you haven't heard, the Ravens missed the game-winning field goal at around 11:45 Eastern Sunday night. And I gasped and my dog jumped out of bed and it was like pitch black in our apartment with just the TV on. My dog jumped out of bed and was like, what's going on? And I was like, you wouldn't understand. You just wouldn't understand.
I can't explain this to you, but it's incredible. Did you do the Mike Tomlin blow a kiss at her then?
Oh my God. Yeah. I ended up rolling over in bed and just watching like TJ Watt and Mike Tomlin and even Aaron Rodgers' press conference until like 1 a.m. on my phone while everyone was asleep. Oh man, what a night!
What a rush!
Scaring your little pug.
Yeah, no, that's probably a good idea. Speaking of rolling over in bed, I hope everyone enjoyed staying up late to watch USC lose to TCU, if that's something that people were interested in over the holidays. So Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to everyone. Share with us your resolutions for Notre Dame football in the new year in our YouTube comments. We always appreciate the people that are active down there. You make it fun to have these conversations. I see a bunch of robust conversations going on in our Instagram stories and reels all the time, which is great.
Very
Keep
robust.
It coming. Every once in a while, some of you maybe take a walk outside, take a deep breath too. There's also that. But either way, we appreciate the engagement. It helps at the Echoes ND Pod on all those areas. Let us know if there's anything that you want to hear, especially as we get further and further into the offseason. We've talked about having some friends, former teammates on, obviously representatives from other sports besides football that are going to be at work there. But certainly want to know and hear from you as well. Maybe there's a mailbag element that we can work into that. So at the Echoes ND Pod on all those areas. But thanks as always for sticking with us. Have a great week and go Irish.